All right, here we go. Chapter 26. And I don't know how many times we've talked about this, but you got to continue to remember that this is more than likely from many. A story that's told is usually told orally, and then as it goes down, someone finally says, "Hey, let's put this in writing," and then many people have heard the story, so many people start to put it in writing, and so you might have different storylines. And so, even though it says David spares Saul again, it could be a possibility that this is just more or less a repeat of what occurred. But it's interesting to think that that might not be the case because the locations are different from the first one. So let's go on and see what's going to happen here. I got this first section marked in red to look at the map, so we'll see that in just a minute. So men from Ziph came to Saul in Gibeah and reporting that David was hiding on the hill of Hakilah at the edge of Jeshimon. And so we look and we'll see what we got here. And I think it's going to be this one as it slowly comes up. Come on. This one? Oh, so it's going to be Henri. See the map? I don't either. Okay, hold on. I got this one, but this is not what I was looking for. Hold on a second. I think I can still use it. This is almost a lot of what's going on is basically in the same area. And what we're going to see in a minute is a little bit more of the southern area. Actually, that's probably where I could use that map I had online here. Let's try this. Yeah, I hope y'all see this one. It looks kind of like a mess, but Hakilah is right here. Y'all see my arrow? Okay. And it shows a dotted line here. David goes to Philistine territory because he's going to be running away from Saul in a little bit, and we're going to talk about that. But that's basically where we're talking about at this point. And it's really interesting. I know you've I can't move this map up, which I could, but it shows a lot of this, including Jerusalem, next to the Dead Sea. But yet, way up here, where the Sea of Galilee is, we'll see some of the things that at the time of Jesus experienced. So Jesus was more than just Jerusalem. He was kind of all over the place. Okay, so let's go back to our reading. All right. So Saul went down to the wilderness of Ziph and 3,000 of his best warriors of Israel. So what they're trying to do is, again, search out David. And Saul camps beside the road on the hill of Hakilah, which is a hill. I think that's what that basically means. A hill in the Judean hill country near Ziph. Okay. And as they go along, David, who is, whoops, my mouse in the wrong spot. David, who was living in the wilderness, saw that Saul had come into the wilderness after him and sent out scouts trying to find David. And so that basically confirmed where Saul's arrival. David then went to the place where Saul was encamped, saw the spot where Saul and his general Abner, son of Ner, had their sleeping quarters. Abner is the son of Ner and the cousin of King Saul, so family member, if you will, all right? And Saul lying within the camp, and all his soldiers were bivouacked. That's a nice military term, isn't it? And this means they're basically encamped around him. So David asked Ahimelech, the Hittite, and Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, and the brother of Job, who will go down into the camp with me to Saul. And just by the way, I think y'all know Ahimelech we talked about earlier. He's the son of Ahitub of the priestly house of Eli. And Abishai is one of the three sons of Zeruiah. That's why that's mentioned right there in scripture. He was a close supporter of David and held trusted positions as a soldier, advisor, and that kind of thing. Okay, so he's asking him, who wants to go down there with me? And Abishai says, says, I will. In fact, we could do this. Let's see what it sounds like in Hebrew.
Avishai.
Abishai. Are you someone who can go over there? No, I'd be shy. I'm sorry, bad joke. Okay. All right. So Abishai will go. So David and Abishai reached Saul's soldiers by night. They're all chilling and sleeping, and there was Saul lying to sleep in the camp. He keeps that spear always with him. In fact, he keeps it right in the ground next to his head. and Abner and his troops are sleeping around him. So stealthily, they go through the camp, stepping over everybody and what have you, and they find Saul's tent. I'm sure it wasn't hard to find Saul's tent. I'm sure it was the fanciest, best tent there was. And Abishai whispers to David, God has delivered your enemy into your hand today. In other words, okay, David, this is great. Here he is. There's a spear. We can go ahead and just take care of this. Let me nail him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I might not need to strike him twice. Well, I guess you wouldn't, really. And David says to Abishai, do not harm him, for who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and remain innocent? Again, we see this character of David who's being faithful to the Lord and what he had done with Saul and his commands, because David has not received any commands from God to kill Saul. And so he's going with that and taking every ounce to work with Saul, if that's even possible. So that's something we can think about as well when we have difficult people in our lives we have to deal with. All right, but homily over. Okay, so he said, do not harm him. And then, okay, only the Lord can strike him, either when the time comes for him to die or when he goes out and perishes in battle. So that's just what we're just talking about. But the Lord forbid that I lay a hand on the Lord's anointed, and I'll take the spear at his head and the water jug and let him be on his way. Well, why are they doing that? Well, we're going to see why he's actually doing that, but you got an idea of the purpose of doing so. So David took the spear and the water jug from their place at Saul's head, and they withdrew without anyone seeing or knowing or awakening. And if you look, you can see why this was so maybe relatively easy. All remained asleep because of deep slumber from the Lord have fallen upon them. So again, it's important for us to see in the scriptures that whatever David does, God blesses, God is with, God will continue to support what needs to be done. So the Lord made sure everybody was crashed. David taunts Abner. So Abner, again, a relative, the cousin of Saul, says, crossing over to an opposite slope, to give you that separation, right? David stood on a distant hilltop, but he must have been yelling pretty loud to have this conversation, with a great distance between them. So David calls out to Abner and says, will you not answer, Abner? And then Abner shouts back, who is it that calls me? And David says, are you not a man? Well, that's just cold-blooded right there. Who in Israel is your equal? Why were you not guarding your lord the king when one of his subjects came to assassinate the king, your lord? So now he's trying to make him look bad. Okay. And he says, what you have done is not right. As the Lord lives, your people deserve death because you have not guarded your Lord, the anointed of the Lord. Go look. Where are the king's spear and the water jug that was at his head? Now, I would think that Saul would have recognized that right off the bat. But I guess Saul wasn't out of his tent yet, looking for his water and his spear. But Saul does recognize David's voice. And he asked, is that your voice, David, my son? I'm picturing some old blind guy. Who is that? Who is it? And David answers, yes, my lord, the king. Always showing that respect. He continues, why does my Lord pursue his servant? And this is the same kind of conversation we had in the first one, the first time he escapes from Saul. What have I done? What evil am I planning? Please now let my Lord the king listen to the words of his servant. If the Lord has incited you against me, may an offering please the Lord. But if it is the people who have done so, may they be cursed before the Lord. They have driven me away so that today I have no share in the Lord's heritage. What he means by that is that they've driven him outside of Israel, outside of the place, the Judah and all that kind of thing. And so if he's living over basically where the Philistines are, then how can you worship God outside of the land that God has blessed and given them? That's kind of the general idea. So here you are in Philistine. And of course, if you were to practice your faith over in the land of the Philistines, that's obviously not going to be good for you at all. So basically cut him off from God is what he's trying to say. But if, where did I leave off at? But am told, go serve other gods. Do not let my blood spill on the ground far from the presence of the Lord. In other words, if I'm not in Israel territory, don't kill me. Allow me to die at least on the land that the Lord has given us. For the king of Israel has come out to seek a single flea. If he were hunting partridge in the mountains, that's it's a kind of a reference to a partridge as a calling bird, and what they're doing now. David is calling out to Abner and Saul, and it was kind of a play on words, but maybe it made more sense back then, but that was kind of the general idea. Then Saul says, I have done wrong. So again, same time as last time, he's again, a big remorse for what his big pursuits are. And of course, he does realize what he's doing is wrong. Come back, David, my son. I will not harm you again, because you consider my life precious today, even though I have been a fool and have made a serious mistake. Okay, so we'll move up a little bit. So David's going to respond, here is the king's spear. Let an attendant come over to get it. He doesn't want to keep his weapons, especially the spear, which must be pretty important to King Saul, which, of course, David, you never knows, is trusting in God, but he's not quite sure how long is he going to last. I mean, he's been running pretty hard from Saul, and one day someone can turn him in or whatever else, and he might die by that same spear. I'm sure Saul would want to kill him personally. Let an attendant come over and get it. The Lord repays everyone's righteousness and faithfulness. Although the Lord delivered you into my hands today, I cannot lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. So what he's saying is that God's going to bless him for doing the right thing and not killing Saul, because Saul was anointed by God. Just as I regarded your life as precious today, so may the Lord regard my life as precious and deliver me from all dangers. So what he's trying to say is that he's doing the right thing. He's righteous, he's faithful, and doing as God wants him to do. And so he's hoping, because of that, he'll have the blessings of not being ever in danger in his life. So Saul says to David, blessed are you, my son David. You shall certainly succeed in whatever you undertake. And David went away, and Saul returned to his place. So that's that whole story right there, that whole pericope. So it's a short chapter, and it's just, again, the same kind of storyline that we had earlier, where we're just kind of like, okay, well, David's going to have a chance to do Saul in, but he does the more right thing and stays faithful to God's call for him. Okay, chapter 27. David flees not from the Philistines, but to the Philistines. David said to himself, I shall perish someday at the hand of Saul. So again, like I was saying, he's being faithful, but he just fears maybe God's blessings will be with me for so long before this all ends. I have no choice but to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up his continual search for me throughout the land of Israel, and I will be out of reach. So it's pretty daring to go over to the Philistine side, and he's very famous, and so who knows what's going to happen. But he feels like he's got no other choice. I just got to get out of Israel. Everybody's going to recognize me over there. And maybe if I duck down in here and stay over in the Philistine area for a while, then maybe I'll be okay. And so they do this. David departs with 600 soldiers and went over to Achish, son of Moab. Achish is the king of Gath. It says basically he's the Philistine king of the city of Gath during the time of David. Let's see, there's something else in here. When he fled from Saul, David took refuge at Gath, but he was recognized as a dangerous military leader. If you remember this, we did this in chapter 21, where he acted like he was insane and then went away. And then he took refuge a second time, and the relationship actually changes, because now he's going to recognize him. And we'll just see what happens. So David and his men lived in Gath with Achish. Each one had his family with him, and David had his 2 wives. So all these men that are faithful to David were always traveling with them, but they always had all their families with them as well, not just warriors. So it was their whole community, if you will, almost like he's building up Israel right before Saul with all these individuals. I put this one in orange. Now, one had 2 wives, and one is Abigail. And now I know he was married to Mabel, but again, remember she was Saul's daughter, and now she's with somebody else back in Gibeah. So Ahinoam is the daughter, It's not number one, but number two. A wife of David, a woman of Jezreel, and the mother of David's firstborn, Amnon. So we won't see that until 2 Samuel chapter 3. And she was with David on his visit to the Philistines. So that's her. And I think it's pronounces rather interestingly.
Ahinoam.
Ahinoam. Okay. It's all in the accents, right? So when Saul learned that David had fled to Gath, he no longer searched for him. He thought, I'll have to go over there and battle all the Philistines at the same time looking for David. It's like a needle in a haystack. So why bother? So David said to Achish, if I meet with your approval, let me have a place to live in one of the country towns. Why should your servant live with you in the royal city? The royal city was a much bigger city, obviously, not just a tribal city. And so that same day, Achish gave him Ziklag, which was therefore belonged to the king of Judah up to the present time, because the Philistines took it from them. And in all, David lived 1 year and 4 months in Philistine territory. So he was over there quite for some time with, again, all of his men and his wives. I think, I don't know if it has much about Ziklag. It just says here, a frontier town in the territory of Simeon and Judah. It's actually located, let's see if I wish my maps would come up. I don't know what the problem was. Ziklag is located, maybe it's on that other map. Let's see. I love the fact that this is not coming up. There's Ziklag. Oh well. Ziklag. Well, Ziklag is kind of down in this area here. Don't know why my map's not coming up, but that's just the way electronics work, right? It just takes a while. I'll leave it up there. Maybe it'll load up. Okay. That's called a time killer. Okay. So David says to Achish, oh, yeah, that's right. Okay. So that same day, Achish gave him Ziklag, which has therefore belonged to the kings of Judah up to the present time. All right. Okay, we got all that. I'm sorry. I just read that. Intermission. Hold on. Okay, we're back now. David raised Israel's foes. David and his men went out on raids. So what's going on here is that we're going to see David looking like he's helping Achish with the Philistines' battles and fights. So it's kind of actually a very intelligent way that he, conniving way, that he does what he wants to do, but fools Achish into doing it. So they live in the land between Talam and the approach to Shur and the land of Egypt. In other words, I missed over some of these names here. You got Gershites, and you have Gerzites, and you have Amalekites, and these, especially the Amalekites, are all in the southern region. They're all south of where we were looking at a minute ago. I think that might have been on that map. Let me see this real quick here. Well, here's Ziklag. Hey, if y'all see that. And where they're going to is actually south of that. I had another map that showed it, but oh well, that's okay. So he's heading down here in this region doing these battles. Okay, so let's go back. In attacking the land, David would not leave a man or woman alive that he was in the places that he was attacking, but would carry off sheep, oxen, donkeys, camels, and clothes, and all that kind of stuff. And then he would return to Achish, and it tells you why he was doing this. He would ask him, "Against whom did you raid this time?" It's like he just kind of went out and came back. And I'm surprised. It's interesting that Achish did not send any of the Philistines with him when he was doing this, because they were not going where he thought he was going, and then that way they would tell on him, or keep track of him. So he goes, "Against who did you raid this time?" And he goes, "Against the Negeb of Judah." And Negeb is basically means a dry, arid land, which is a lot of the southern areas of this area. Or against the Negeb of Jerahmeel, or against the Negeb of the Kenites. So he wasn't doing that. He was attacking other places that we learned up here, the Gershites, the Gervites, and the Amalekites. Okay. So David never left a man or woman alive to be brought back to Gath. And the reason is that they would betray us, and this is what they will betray us and say this is what David did. So if he brought anybody back, then it would be bad news for David and his men and his families. So this was a custom as long as he lived in the Philistine territory, because he did this again for 16 months. He was doing this, and he developed a really strong relationship with Achish, the king, and of course he started to trust David. So the people of Israel must certainly detest him. I shall have him as my vassal forever. In other words, his side man, or the one that's going to help him, do things he thinks he's doing. But again, David's got him all mixed up. Okay. So it doesn't take too long to go through these. Let's see. Chapter 28. So let's see what happens. In those days, the Philistines mustered their military forces to fight against Israel. So Achish said to David, you realize, of course, that you and your warriors must march out for battle with me. Because what he's saying is that, all right, we're going against Israel. So, you've lived in our company. I gave you Ziklag and all this other kind of stuff. So you got to go with us to continue this battle. We need you, all that kind of stuff. And so David answered Achish, good, now you shall learn what your servant can do. And Achish said to David, I shall appoint you as my permanent bodyguard. Now, we're not going to know exactly what he would have done, but David might have had plans to do something different, because he wasn't going to necessarily, by any means, allow Achish to actually invade and destroy any of Israel in this manner. So it's almost like it's a two-sided comment when he says, I'm going to show you what I'm going to be able to do. He says, now Samuel was dead, and we know this. We're going to go to a little bit of a different storyline, then it's going to pick back up with David and Achish. Now Samuel was dead. All Israel had mourned him and buried him in his city of Ramah. And then we've already gone through all that. But Scripture is reminding you of this again, because it's going to play here with Samuel. Meanwhile, Saul had driven mediums and diviners out of the land. As he knows through Scripture, Old Testament even, telling you that people have that gift to look beyond this world into the next, necromancy, to talk to the dead, all those kind of things were not allowed. So he chased them all out. And so at this point, Saul's in despair, just over the Philistine things, over David, and all that kind of stuff. So the Philistines rallied, and coming to Shunem, they encamped, and Saul too mustered all of Israel, because again, the Philistines are coming their way. So they camped in Gilboa. When Saul saw the Philistine camp, he grew afraid and lost heart completely. He doesn't carry, in a sense, God with him like he used to do. So now fear comes in real easily, doubt comes in real easily, that kind of thing. So when Saul saw the Philistine camp, he grew afraid. Okay, so he consulted the Lord, but the Lord gave no answer. Very frustrated when you realizing that if you think God's not there with you anymore. So it says, neither in dreams nor by the Urim. And Urim, remember, it's the Urim and Thummim that they would use to allow sacred lots to be thrown, if you will, that are kept, again, as it says here, in the breastplace of the high priest to help make decisions. And so none of that was helping them make any decisions of what he should do. So then Saul said to the servants, find me a medium through whom I can seek counsel. Now, we see then we see Saul over and over again, breaking the rules of the law, trying to be his own priest at times, just not respecting God's wishes. And one more time, we're seeing him do this again. So they say, you know what? There is a woman in Endor who is a medium. So apparently this lady, word must have got around, because she's still kind of around, but supposedly, low key. So he disguised himself, putting on other clothes, and set out with 2 companions. And they came to the woman at night, under the cover of darkness, and went to go see her. And Saul said to her, divine for me, conjure up the spirit that I tell you. But the woman doesn't recognize who she's talking to, of course. And the woman answered him, you know what Saul has done. He's expelled all the mediums and diviners from the land. And why are you trying to entrap me and get me killed? So basically, she's saying, I haven't done anything. So, I'm not going to die because of what you want me to do. But Saul swore to her by the Lord, as the Lord lives, you shall incur no blame for this. So she goes, okay, that's good enough for me. Who do you want me to conjure up? And the woman asked him. And he replies, conjure up Samuel for me. So he always went back to Samuel, the one person that anointed him, that he trusted. I'm not hearing from God. I need to hear from Samuel. So sure enough, here comes Samuel. When the woman saw Samuel, she shrieked at the top of her voice and said to Saul, why have you deceived me? You are Saul. So by this figure coming in and seeing who this might be, she now can see the connection between that coming back from the dead and who is requesting him, and through her abilities sees who this man is and recognizes it's the king. So the king says, hey, look, chill, no big deal. Don't be afraid of this. Just tell me what you see. She goes, okay, well, I see a God rising from the earth. This is a very powerful statement in the sake of Samuel, because of how it's a way of giving great honor to Samuel, even at this point of coming back from the dead at this point, and saying like a God rising from earth. What does he look like? Asked Saul. Well, it looks like an old man who's coming up wrapped in a robe. Now, there's a lot you can do with this, but when you think about it, you always kind of wonder, gee, what are we going to look like when we, die or go to heaven or, to the other side and all that kind of stuff. And he's coming back as an old man. But at the same time, Jesus has not raised the dead yet. So he might be coming from the land of, I wouldn't say Gehenna, but the land of the dead. And so those who await, Christ's appearance, death, and resurrection. And so she replies this, and then Saul knew that it was Samuel, and so he bowed his face to the ground in homage. So he's happy to see Samuel. I don't think Samuel's happy about being woken up. So Saul's doom, and here we go. There's going to be some words from Samuel to Saul. Why do you disturb me by conjuring me up? And so Saul replies, I'm in great distress, for the Philistines are waging war against me, and God has turned away from me. Since God no longer answers me through the prophets or in dreams, I have called upon you to tell me what I should do. And so here we go. He's trying to figure out another way of what's going on and doing it in the wrong way. So Samuel tells him, and he's going to tell him something he doesn't want to hear. But why do you ask me if the Lord has abandoned you for your neighbor? The Lord has done to you what he declared through me. In other words, Saul, I've already told you what's going to happen to you. That hasn't changed. He has torn the kingdom from your hand and has given it to your neighbor David. Because you disobeyed the Lord disobeyed the Lord's directive and would not carry out his fierce anger against Amalek. Because remember, he didn't kill everybody off, and they took booty, if you will, from the battles that they had and everything else. The Lord has done this to you today. Moreover, also, the Lord will deliver Israel and you as well into the hands of the Philistines. By tomorrow, you and your sons will be with me, and the Lord will deliver the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines. Okay, so, he's probably thinking twice if he should even bother to call up Samuel, because he's hearing the bad news, and he's hearing it again, even from the dead, that tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. And, well, you know what that means. So, and then the Israel army will be taken over by the Philistines. And we can be assured that that's what's going to happen. Immediately Saul fell full length on the ground in great fear because of Samuel's message. And it goes, he had no strength left, has eaten nothing all day and night. Then the woman came to Saul, and seeing that he was quite terror-stricken, said to him, so the woman tells him this, remember your maidservant obeyed you. Basically saying, don't kill me. I took my life in my hands and carried out the request you made of me. Now you, in turn, please listen to your maidservant. Let me set out a bit of food for you to eat, so that you are strong enough to go on your way." So she's making nice. But he refused, saying, "I'm not going to eat. I don't want any food. I'm going to be dead here shortly." So they kept urging him to eat. So he listened to their entreaties, got up from the ground, and sat on the couch. And the woman had a stall-fed calf in the house. In the house, had a calf. In homes were different back then, right? Which she now quickly slaughtered. Then, taking the flour, she kneaded it and baked unleavened bread. She set the meal before Saul and his servants, and they ate. Then they got up and left that same night. Totally depressed, I'm sure. Okay, this is going by pretty quick here. We'll be done in just a minute. Chapter 29. So David's aides are rejected. Now the Philistines, now we're kind of back to that part where Achish was telling him to go into battle with him. And David thought this might be a wonderful opportunity to save Israel and to do what he can. So now the Philistines had mustered all the forces of Aphek, and the Israelites were encamped at the spring of Jezreel. And as the Philistine lords were marching their units of 100 and 1,000, David and his warriors were marching in a rear guard with Achish. So the king stays back, and all the movement of all the troops go forward, and David and his troops, because he trusts David so much, he trusts him remember, he's his bodyguard. So he's going to have him near his side to help protect him and keep him safe. The Philistine commanders, since they're all mustering up in different places, what are those Hebrews doing here? So I guess they could recognize them. So they thought, okay, this doesn't seem right. And Achish answered them, "Why, that is David, the officer of Saul, king of Israel. He has been with me for a year or two, and from the day he came over to me until now, I have never found fault in him." Well, he hasn't been paying attention. But he's saying, hey, you can trust David, he's just fine. Well, the other commanders are thinking, we're not crazy about this, and we're not happy at all. In fact, we're kind of ticked off. This is silly. This is David you're talking about, a faithful warrior for Israel. And you got to know that everybody knows he's probably running from Saul. I'm surprised they didn't put that together, but the commanders have an idea. So the commanders said to Achish, "Send that man back. Let him return to the place you picked out for him. He must not go down into the battle with us, because during the battle he might become our enemy," which might be more truth than fiction. "For how else can we win back his master's favor, if not at the expense of our soldiers?" In other words, man, we're going to be battling Israel on one side and they're on the other side. This isn't going to be good. This is not the David for whom they sang. Is this not David for whom they sang during their dances? Saul has slain the thousands and David his tens of thousands. So that's the third time we've seen this in scripture, this same verse, where how great David is. So apparently word does get around. Like I always said, who needs Facebook and the internet? Okay, so Achish summoned David and had a talk with him and had to tell him, look, as the Lord lives, you're honest. You're a great guy. I really appreciate you. But I'd want you with me in all of my battles. You're great. But to this day, I have found nothing wrong with you since you came to me. But in the view of the chiefs, you're not welcome. What can I do? They're just like, we're not going to battle with you. So if you don't mind, leave peacefully and do nothing that might displease the Philistine chiefs. In other words, go quietly, go humbly, back to Ziklag, if you will, and allow us to take care of this. But David says to Achish, what have I done? What fault have you found in your servant from the day I entered your service until today, that I cannot go to fight against the enemies of my lord the king? Well, David has plans, and he really wants to be a part of this battle and to help save Israel from this battle. Not sure that's God's intent, though, obviously, because we just saw twice, the second time from Samuel telling him Israel is going to be handed over to the Philistines at this point. So David is not really being led. He doesn't understand this, but he's not being led by God to do this. So Achish says to him, I recognize that you are trustworthy, like an angel of God. So Achish, I mean, I tell you, David must have some very strong charisma about his personality. We see that throughout Scripture. We'll see it in 2 Samuel as well. But the Philistine commanders are saying, he must not go with us into battle. It's just like, okay, David, it's not me. It's everybody else. So the first thing tomorrow, you and the Lord's servants who came with you, go to the place I picked out for you. Do not take to heart their worthless remarks. We have been valuable in my service, but make an early morning start. As soon as it grows light, be on your way. In other words, okay, you chill, but in the morning, y'all need to go ahead and go. So David thought, if I continue to push this, we're going to have some bigger issues here. They're not going to trust me anymore. And I need to keep this valuable relationship with Achish at this point in time so I can stay in the Philistine country, if you will. And so just go ahead and find another day, I guess, to take care of this. So David and his warriors left early in the morning to return to the land of the Philistines. And the Philistines went up to Jezreel. So I'm not ready for 30 yet, and it's kind of long, but we're gonna see some really cool stuff. But y'all have a Bible handy, so y'all can check it out, see how it goes, or we can wait until next week. It actually went by pretty fast, but it is almost 10 till.